The following program is a Drop D podcast production.
DarkMyths.org and Neapolis Media Group proudly present to you the Lone Gunman Podcast, featuring your host, Rob Clark, where research comes to shine and myths come to die. Stay tuned. Be right there.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Lone Gunman Podcast. This is episode number 152. Today I got a special guest joining the show, the author of the new book, Malcontent, Lee Harvey Oswald's Confession by Conduct, Mr. Sean DeGrilla. Welcome, Sean.
Hey, Rob. Thank you. It's quite an honor. Thank you very much.
Hey, well, thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for sending me a copy of your book to check out. As you know, we might butt some heads during this conversation. I'm a diehard conspiracy theorist, and this is pretty much putting Lee Harvey Oswald in the electric chair. But
That it is. All right. All right. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's get into it, man. So, look, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you became interested in this case, first of all.
Well, I grew up in Dallas in the 80s and early 90s. And one day, my parents and I were having dinner, and my dad pointed down over to Dealey Plaza and said, "Hey, that's where Kennedy was shot." I had no idea what he was talking about. And he goes, "Some people." I said, "What happened?" And he goes, "Well, some people believe it was Oswald in that building there, and some people believe somebody fired from the grassy knoll." And right then and there, my curiosity was piqued, and I had to find out everything I could about it. And since I lived there, it was just a perfect opportunity.
Well, definitely. That's cool. So what sparked you? I mean, I know you have a law enforcement background. So what kind of sparked you to take a look at the case from this angle?
Well, as a kid, I met with Penn Jones Jr. and witnesses, and I was very impressionable. So I always believed there was a conspiracy. As I got older, I started to think for myself, and the catalyst was when I joined the police academy and started interacting with. I learned criminal behavior. And during my arrests and talking to people I've arrested and just the life experience as a deputy sheriff, I came to realize that I made some comparisons, some parallels between Oswald's behavior and behavior of criminals that I came into contact with every day. So that really started me down the path to looking at his behavior and his words, which there have been several books about that, but no one's really gone into especially his computer voice stress analysis. So I wanted to use my tools as a law enforcement officer to add kind of a unique flavor to this, because there's only been a handful of authors who are law enforcement officers that have written books.
All right, so we're going to be talking about a lot of stuff here today. You know, it's not just going to be the computer voice stress analysis. So give everybody your website so they can kind of, if they want to pause it here and go check it out and kind of get an overview of what exactly we're going to be talking about here today.
Sure. It's SeanDeGrilla.com. And on my website, I have, I believe, all the charts from my book and a lot of the photos from my book as well. So it's on there. And also on Facebook, I have Malcontent Facebook page as well.
Great. And while we're at it, just tell everybody where they can get a copy of your book.
Right now, it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble website, and hopefully Barnes & Noble will be carrying it shortly. I should hear something from them soon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, so let's get into it, man. Let's talk about some of the pre-assassination behavior of Lee Harvey Oswald that made you think that he might have been a little suspect.
Well, Oswald liked to lie. That's what he did a lot. If he wasn't lying, he was being surreptitious and the things he did and the things he said. So his application to the book depository, there were errors on that. But what really was keen for me was immediately after the assassination. For example, I was able to locate in the Warren Commission volumes his clipboard he used to put his orders on to fulfill orders for the day. That was found December 2nd, hidden about 20 feet away from where the rifle was hidden. There were no orders on that clipboard at all. And Roy Truly, the book depository supervisor, said he did a good day's work. But on the morning of November 22nd, he hadn't filled a single order. So it's things like this that started me to pique my curiosity. For example, he didn't stick around to give a written or verbal statement to law enforcement. Within 3 minutes, he was out the door. And he was the only employee that I'm aware of that did so.
I think James Jarman may have not been present as well.
But I believe he came back. I think you're right. I think he went up to Houston Street for a little bit, but I believe he did come back.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, also the only one that was gone. But the whole point of his behavior was this: would you flee the scene of a crime? Well, yeah, you might. If you're scared, you don't want to get shot, you're nervous, you don't know what's going on. Yeah, you might flee the scene. I've seen that happen in my law enforcement career. But would you flee the scene? Would you change your appearance? Would you arm yourself? Would you kill a police officer? Would you attempt to kill your arresting police officers? Would you answer some questions but not others? So all this stuff, these were not the actions of someone who's innocent. Either he was being framed or he was guilty.
Right. And I talk a little bit about the arrest contrast when he was arrested in New Orleans and his behavior after he was arrested in Dallas. Because that's kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah, they're totally two different things. It's like night and day. In New Orleans, he didn't fight police officers. He willingly was arrested. And when he was booked in the jail, he refused to pay his bail. He wanted to stay in jail. He even requested an interview by the FBI. Now, why did he do that? I think probably he wanted to see what the FBI knew about him, because they know he'd been interrogated by the FBI or questioned by the FBI before. So maybe he was trying to play a cat and mouse game with the FBI. But so in New Orleans, he is willingly arrested. He doesn't flee, doesn't try to hurt anybody. He makes very few omissions. For example, he said that he and his wife met in Fort Worth, instead of course we know it was Russia. But other than that, he was mostly honest with the FBI and forthcoming. Then you have Dallas, where he's shooting at a police officer. He's running away from the scene. He refuses to cooperate for the most part. So you have a complete dichotomy of behavior, and it's very compelling in my eyes, anyways.
Yeah, I always found it interesting. Okay, so you figure, say Oswald did it.
Right.
Say he's planned enough he's going to take a rifle into the school book depository and he's going to shoot the president with the rifle and then he's going to make his escape. Why would you not bring your handgun with you instead of having to go back and get it?
You're right, Rob. My take is this. We have to put ourselves back in his mindset.
Right.
I've done presidential or dignitary details before. People don't know whether or not they're going to be searched prior to entering the business, whether or not they're going to be allowed into that business at all. So, Oswald had the rifle wrapped up securely, wrapped it nice and tight in that paper bag. And he held it in such a way where he wasn't holding it parallel to the earth. It was perpendicular. So it made it look like it was something other than what it was. I think he felt he might be searched or patted down before he went in, or that kind of thing. I don't think he was thinking that far ahead. I think he was very incredulous that he's able to enter the building unfettered, go hide the rifle, and do what he was doing for the rest of the morning. I don't think he really thought that far ahead. I thought maybe it's possible he thought he could be found out before the shooting, or he would be shot at during the assassination attempt, or it's a big mystery. We don't know why he did what he did or what he was thinking.
So, yeah, and likely we never will. I mean, but we can make some good guesses.
And that's all they're going to be. Like, my interpretation is my interpretation of it. You know, there are going to be those who disagree or agree with it, but from my experience, this is what I think happened.
Gotcha. Well, let's talk a little bit about the Texas theater, the actual arrest,
Right?
and just analyze his behavior during all that.
Well, in a nutshell, you know, I think after he left the rooming house and he waited at the bus stop, the northbound Beckley bus stop, I think he was just trying to figure out what he's going to do next. Once he realized that the police weren't waiting for him at his rooming house, he didn't know what to do. I think either a library, which he loved to go to, or a theater would offer a perfect place for him just to lay low for a while and kind of think of what he's doing. But, you know, when you're turning your back towards, you know, we all done this before. You hear sirens, you see a police car, ambulance, everybody turns and looks to see what's going on. What are the police doing? Where's this ambulance going? Oswald was the exact opposite. Oswald turns his back and kind of recedes into the store awning a little bit to conceal himself. Johnny Brewer was just the opposite. Like what we do is we're kind of curious. Hey, what are the cops doing around here? What's going on here? Oswald was the opposite. Then he goes in without paying. And then he sits in a dark theater by himself towards the back of the theater. And then when the police come, he says, this is it. You know, he had to know. I've had guns pulled on me before. People know if you pull a gun on a police officer, more than likely you're going to be shot. That's just the way it is.
Right.
And I think what happened was there were so many officers on him coming from behind him and to the sides that he didn't have a chance to, once the gun misfired, he didn't have a chance to really do anything else because they were on him. That was it. Normal people don't do that.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking, you know, just one small mistake. Like if he would have just kept walking down the street instead of slinking into that store opening.
Of course. But then, you know,
thing could have been totally different.
It could have been. Now, obviously, they would have put two and two together eventually. They would have found his rifle. It would have taken longer. But you're absolutely right. But, you know, Jefferson Boulevard and Olive Oak Cliff was swarming with officers. You know, I've responded to and I've seen a deputy killed. And so I know that when you have a shooting, you're getting a response from all the surrounding agencies. And that's what was happening. So, you know, sooner or later it was going to happen. I think he was just, you know, doing the best he could with the circumstances that he presented himself with.
So do you think, just from having law enforcement experience, I always wondered this, do you think, I'm just wondering why, say, J.D. Tippit would have been A, in Oak Cliff, and B, rolling up on people walking down the street and you know, just seeing who they were or something like that. I mean, was that like a common practice back then as far as when you're looking for a suspect, maybe? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, obviously we'll never know.
Yeah.
However, I can tell you that when we have big events here in the Orlando area, that all the cops are going to it, right? So no matter, even they're supposed to be somewhere, everyone wants to see what's going on. Here you had the president shot. All the officers want to go and be a part of it. They want to see what's going on. So it's not unusual for most of the officers in that area to head on down there because they want to be a part of it. They want to say, yes, I was there, I saw it, I helped out, whatever. But once again, there are no officers around for bank robberies, car crashes, burglaries, 911 emergencies, medical emergencies. So Tippit had been on long enough where he didn't want to get involved in that kind of stuff. He was happy being where he was. He was an hour and a half away or so from ending his shift and having Saturday and Sunday off.
Right.
And now there's two schools of thought. Some people believe Oswald was walking eastbound on 10th Street, and some believe he's walking westbound. When Oswald got into the bus after the assassination, his ex-landlord said he looked like a maniac. So maybe the way Oswald was walking, maybe his hair was disheveled, he was overdressed, probably was walking quickly.
Right.
Maybe, or perhaps he was walking towards Tippit, saw the police officer, and turned the other way. I've had people do that to me many, many times, and I checked out with every single one of them.
Right.
Because if someone sees you and they about face and turn, they're up to something.
Right.
So there are all these possibilities, and I believe that's probably what happened. I think when Tippett was talking to him, Oswald probably gave, I don't want to speculate, but something Oswald said or did made Tippett get out of that police car instead of saying, "Okay, sir, have a good day," you know?
Right.
So something he said, we'll never know.
Yeah. Yeah, I was figured that most of the police would have been either at the destination where Kennedy was going, to do his speech, or they would have went to Parkland Hospital to accompany, the shooting victims and provide security, or they would have been on scene investigating the school book depository. And it just so happens, that it seems like this one officer that is not in any of these places just happens to roll up on the right guy.
You're right, but it wasn't just him. And he'd been on for 10 years, almost 11 years. So he knew better. He was more mature than some of the other officers. Wasn't necessarily a go-getter. He just did his job, and that was it. And, you still have other people to serve besides the motorcade. You have this, the citizens of Dallas still deserve to be served by officers. So there had to be some that stayed back and did what they're supposed to be doing. And it's a coincidence that Oswald just happened to start walking down the street that Tippett was on. I mean, that's what a coincidence is. And
right.
I don't see any evidence for anything else, any reliable evidence other than Oswald was trying to figure out what he's going to do next.
Yep. All right. So let's get into a little bit of his defiant attitude after he's arrested. So we get him out of the Texas theater. We've all seen the famous picture of him coming out of the front of the Texas theater looking not too happy.
So that's on my cover of my book, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. And I think Paul Bentley's chomping on a cigar, looking pretty damn happy himself.
Yeah, it's interesting.
And there's always been some, allegations of what he actually said in the police car after his arrest on the way to the station. That when they're asking, hey, they're looking through his wallet. Hey, are you Lee Harvey Oswald? Or are you Alex Heidel? And he's, I don't know. You're the cop. You figure it out.
Yeah, that's not what I can tell you that 99.9% of the people I've arrested or been accused of crimes are guilty. However, there are those that are innocent, and those who are innocent, like, are you crazy? I want to speak to your supervisor. What are you doing? Let me talk to somebody else. This is wrong. Get somebody down here. He didn't say any of that stuff. He was smirking. Oh, a police officer been killed? Or what's your name? You figure it out.
Right.
Something effective. And there's different interpretations of what he said, but essentially as, you're the cop, you figure it out. Well, that's not what an innocent person would say. I can tell you that if I've been accused of something, I'd be like, hey, yeah, my name is so-and-so, and this is where I live. I just here to watch a movie. This is what I was doing. But, beforehand, he pulled out a gun, that kind of stuff. So you have to put everything, it's the totality of the circumstances. It's not just that conversation in the backseat of the patrol car. It's other things as well. But that's not what an innocent person would say.
All right, let's move on to his questioning by various people, I guess, once he's actually in custody at the station and he's answering questions. To me, it seems like he's being a little more forthright once he's at the station. He's telling them the truth. Hey, I lived in Russia.
Right.
I don't know what you're talking about with this curtain rod stuff. And, I brought my lunch. That's it. I did see somewhere where he had stated, how big was your lunch sack? And he says something about it's hard to find just the right bag to fit your lunch. Right. Something that.
That's crazy. They said he put his sack, I think he said next to him, either next to him or in his lap. I forget without looking back at it. But yeah, so he would answer questions. He would answer the softball questions that had nothing to do, had nothing to do with his criminal case against him. So he talked about Russia. He talked about the cars over there, the refrigerators, that kind of stuff to some of the detectives.
Right.
But when it came time to, to asking, pertinent questions about his, the backyard photographs, for example, that Marina Oswald admitted to taking that clearly show Lee Harvey Oswald with the rifle and the pistol and the periodicals, then he would make up something ridiculous like, oh, he wouldn't answer it, or he'd say, oh, that's my head superimposed on somebody else's body. I've never seen those before. So the softball questions that meant nothing to him, that would not lead to the police gathering any sort of criminal intelligence on him to build their case, he would answer them. But anytime you'd ask him a question about where exactly he was during the assassination or that kind of thing, he wouldn't answer. Or about the IDs he had on him, the 2 forms of ID, he wouldn't answer about that. He says, "You found it. You know more about it than I do."
Right.
Well, that's not how you would react to something like that.
Well, what's your take on the backyard pictures as far as them being authentic? I mean, I don't know if you've looked into the photographic analysis of these backyard photographs.
There was a study several years ago. I don't have it in front of me now, but they've conclusively proven, yes, it was Lee Harvey Oswald. Marina remembered taking them. In fact, Marguerite Oswald testified that they actually destroyed some of them, including one of them where he's holding the rifle above his head. So, yeah, there's another pose that we've never seen, and we'll probably never see. We haven't found the negatives of that. So, absolutely, they're real. If you get into these are faked, then yes, you have a massive conspiracy to kill President Kennedy. But all the analysis that I have seen, including the one several years ago, states that yes, these are authentic. Even Marina Oswald, who now believes there's a conspiracy, not because of what she's seen, but because she's been told by those in the conspiracy community, admitted, yes, I took these pictures. So to me, there's no question about their authenticity.
Well, I think she's flip-flopped over the years to where I took one picture, or something to that effect, and it was
right
with Robert Oswald's camera. It wasn't with the reflex camera or whatever it was supposed to be. But her story's changed over the years as well. And
it has, but here's another point. Well, first of all, anything Marina says, you have to take with a grain of salt, especially nowadays.
Yeah.
But back then, I went to the primary sources. I have the 26 volumes of the Warren Commission, so I went back to her testimony. What did she say? What did Marina and Lee is a great book, and that was researched after the Warren Commission, and she admitted taking these pictures. I believe there's tests where they took pictures from the Imperial reflex camera, and that's proven it came from that camera. So just like any witness, people are human, cops are human. We have different takes or interpretations of how certain events occurred, but I have no doubt at all that they're authentic. Absolutely none.
What are your feelings? And this doesn't necessarily have to relate to the book at all, but I'm just wondering, with your experience, how did you view the Dallas Police Department's investigation of this case? How do you think they handled it?
Well, with any investigation, there were mistakes made, no doubt about it. I can tell you that we've had several high-profile cases, the sheriff's office here in the Orlando area, and we make mistakes. In fact, we make mistakes on a daily basis. There's no doubt about that. Whether it's DUIs or any type of criminal case, mistakes happen. But you can't compare 2019 law enforcement practices with 1963. It just does not work. When I look at something, what they did with their manhandling some of the evidence, I cringe at that because that's not how you're supposed to do things. But back then, things were different. The educations were different. The mentality was different. Part of my book part of my research for Malcontent is I got a 1969 Dallas Police Manual, and I went back and said, okay, how were things done back then? And there is very little guidance, if any, when it comes to some of the allegations that are made about the malfeasance of the Dallas Police Department.
I think the Dallas police learned a lot from when the FBI came in and kind of took over the investigation. They learned a lot about how to treat evidence, as far as chain of custody and all that stuff, and how to interrogate their suspects maybe a little better, what to do with them, what to do with the evidence, what to do with the scene.
Well, two things. First of all, crime scene evidence. There was no crime scene manual. I could not find one in my investigation, but Pete Barnes, and I have this in my book, Malcontent, was asked about, hey, how do you learn about fingerprinting? And he said that they went out with older officers, and the older street cops showed them how to dust for prints and how to lift them with latent tape with tape, and that's how they did it. It was basically on the job training. CSI was not around back then, so you have to put yourself back in the 1963 mindset. So you look at some things now like, oh my God, it looks so archaic, and it was, but that's how business was done. Now, it may be different in LA or it could be different in New York at that time, but in Dallas, that was the acceptable practice. They absolutely learned a lot from this, and they have egg on their face because, you can't justify some of that. They should have recorded the interrogation. Somebody should have said, "Man, this is historic. We should go find a tape recorder somewhere."
Right.
Nobody stepped up. I'm not excusing what they did, but you have to understand what they did. For interrogations, there was no policy that I found for interrogations. I did see some in-service training, which is training officers go through throughout the year, that they kind of brush up on their skills. And the University of Oklahoma put on interrogation training for Dallas officers. I contacted them. They found one of the professors at that time, but they had no training materials left over because that was from the 50s. So That was
Well, it's not just to excuse the Dallas police. I mean, you have the FBI there, you have the Secret Service there interrogating them, and nobody seemed to make the call to, hey, maybe we should record this.
Right.
And they had the resources.
And they did. And it was a different day. It's a different time, a different age, and they should have done it. I'm not saying I'm not excusing them. They should have done it. And unfortunately, we've lost that for posterity. We don't have it. But it's just the way things were done back then. Of course, now it's gone. The spectrum, the pendulum has swung all the way to the other side, where there's so much liability that now police, if you didn't document it, it didn't happen. That's the way law enforcement is now. Body cameras, vehicle cameras, that kind of thing. So it's different nowadays. But you also have to think about the court rulings for lineups, for show-ups, for Miranda. That stuff didn't come out yet. There was a flurry of Supreme Court rulings towards the end of the 60s, that dictated now how police shall and shall not conduct themselves, especially in relationship to prisoners. So it was just a different time, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah, I mean, if you can believe, I don't know if you've ever heard Bill Frazier talk about his Fritz interrogation when Fritz came in there and slapped a confession in writing down in front of him and told him to sign it, or he was going to punch him in the face or something of that nature. I say their techniques needed a little more couth, but I mean, like I said, back then there really wasn't a lot of outlining about it, and from what I've read, Fritz had a hell of a record, as far as getting convictions.
That's true. And when I was talking to someone in the police department who knew of Fritz, they, a lot of officers didn't like him. They respected him because of his tenure and his experience in the PD, but a lot of them didn't like him or get along with him. And it was just a different way of doing things back then. It's amazing that kind of undocumented state of policing would go on. It's not surprising, though, I should say, because we've seen more and more of that as I was dealing with this, the research for this book.
Yeah. Now let's get into a little bit about Lee Harvey Oswald and his representation.
Yeah, that's right.
And then maybe talk a little bit about John Abt.
Well, John Abt was the the premier attorney for the Communist Party USA. And he was well known for his defense of people accused of violating the Smith Act, which essentially said, in part, that you must register as a communist and that you cannot hold federal jobs if you were a communist. And basically, it was discrimination, is what it was, based on your political ideology. So when Oswald asked for an attorney, he asked for Abt, and he even spelled it ABT. And when he was allowed phone calls eventually, he did make phone calls to Abt, but he was on vacation in Kent, Connecticut, in his cabin for the weekend, and was unable to get a hold of him. He even had Ruth Payne try to get a hold of Abt as well.
Well, didn't some local lawyer offer to be his counsel and he turned it down?
The head of the Dallas Bar Association came there just to make sure that Oswald's rights are being protected, and is there anything he can do? And Oswald assured him that yes, his rights are being protected and that he has already requested an attorney. When Robert Oswald visited Lee in jail, Robert volunteered to get him a local attorney, and Lee said, "No, I want this one." He was very emphatic. He wanted Apt for his attorney. Yeah, he said if he couldn't get Apt, he might get somebody from the ACLU.
Right.
But in the interim, he wanted Apt because he was. What did Apt represent? He represented the Communist Party of the United States of America.
Right.
That's what he was known for. That wasn't just maybe a side gig he did. That's what he did. So that's another thing. Why would you want that attorney? Why wouldn't you want somebody? No, that's there are plenty. F. Lee Bailey. It could have been. It could have been anybody. But no, he wanted this guy.
Well, since you mentioned that, it made me think of get into a little bit about how Oswald's behavior to Robert, to Marina, to his mother, after he's arrested, when he can speak with them privately, I'm assuming, without being overheard or recorded, and then get into a little bit about maybe his defiance or his thoughts, until the very end.
Well, Robert Oswald made the comment in his book that the Lee he was talking to was not the Lee that he knew. It was not his brother. Not saying it was an imposter, of course.
And it's a double. It's a double.
Oh boy, here we go. There it is.
Ben Harvey.
There it is. Yeah, exactly right. That it wasn't. Lee. Even Marina said if Lee was innocent, he would be protesting up and down. He would make such a scene, but he was resigned to the fact that this is what was going on. And so Marina herself said that she knew that Lee was guilty based on his own actions, that he wasn't making these protestations anymore. Something else that's interesting is he didn't bring up his family to Lee. He's got 2 little girls and a wife, and he was very divorced from that situation up until Robert brought it up to him. So what about your kids? Oh, they're at the Ruth Paynes. They'll take care of them. So he was just in a different zone. And Marina and Robert, probably the 2 people who knew him the best, said that was not the way Lee was usually would act.
Yeah,
it's like I said, not just one thing does it, but when you add everything together, the totality of the circumstances, one thing by itself means nothing. Maybe even 10 things by themselves mean nothing. But when you have these elements, compounding each other, for me anyways, as a cop, I'm like, yeah. And if you understand, or try to anyways, study Lee Harvey Oswald, you would understand, man, nobody can make him do anything. If he was right, he was right. If he was wrong, he was wrong. And they knew by his actions that, no, he was guilty of something.
Yeah, I mean, just as a father, I mean, and you could probably step into these shoes as well.
Yep.
How you could imagine yourself. Okay, you already have a little girl.
Right.
You just had a baby.
Right.
Okay, maybe your marriage isn't the greatest. Maybe things are tough. But damn, I mean, what would possess somebody to throw all that away just for a statement of ideology?
You're right, and it's hard for there are some things that only the people who do them understand,
right?
And that we'll never know. But he was leading a miserable life. From all accounts, he was poor. He had a common laborer's job. His education was very minimal. No friends. DeMoor had moved back to Haiti earlier that year. So it's just, what did he have to lose? I think he was I don't know if he had any sort of psychoses. I'm not a psychologist or anything like that, so I don't know. But he was I think he was just looking for a way out. I think he was done with his life. I believe he felt that due to his notoriety that his kids would be taken care of one way or another.
And they were.
Absolutely right. And he was right about that. And I think he was thinking of himself more than anything else. Because I have 3 kids, small kids myself, and I couldn't imagine doing this, but I'm not in Oswald's shoes. Right. We lead totally divergent lives, so I just don't know. Sheer desperation.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it seems like. I mean, it has to be like some kind of a where you think that you have no other option whatsoever. But I just can't imagine being in that place. And it doesn't seem to me like he had hit. I mean, maybe he had, hit rock bottom, but it's so hard to speculate.
Well, it is, and it is all speculation. You're right. I think he was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Bottom line, and this opportunity presented itself, and he was going to see if he could pull it off. I mean, the events of November 22nd is like a chain link fence. One little link is gone, and the whole thing collapses. So, he could have been searched on the way inside. He could have been, they could have gotten, the car could have broken down, Buell's car. I mean, any number of things could have happened, but it was just one of these happenstances of history.
So let's get into one of the more, what I think is the more interesting things that you brought up, and that is immediately after Oswald is shot in the basement.
Right.
What happens?
Well, Detective Combest, Graves, and Lavelle drag him back into the jail office. They unhandcuff him, and then Ruby coincidentally is right nearby, laying near him as well. And they get Ruby and they shuffle him off to the interrogation room. Oswald is dying, and Combest testifies that he knew Oswald was dying, and that he asked Oswald, "Do you have anything to say?" Basically, this is his last chance to say anything. Do you have anything to say? And he shook his head no. Later on, he tells Anthony Summers that Lee Harvey Oswald displayed a clenched fist salute. So after the 1968 Olympics, when the USA medal winners stood on that platform with their medals on and held out the clenched fist salute, that was when it came into the public consciousness. That's when people recognized it. And that became when the Black Panthers adopted that symbol as their own. Now, Bernie Sanders does it a lot. You've seen him. I've seen him do it on TV. I've seen Trump a couple of times with a picture like that. So it is a common symbol used to signify unity, whether that unity is, against alleged police brutality or communism or socialism or, equality of the sexes or the races, whatever it is. It's a symbol of unity. But
or
back then,
fight,
exactly right. Well, back then, it didn't mean any of those things because it didn't happen yet.
Right.
So it was a symbol used commonly for socialists. And Oswald read a lot, and he knew that. There's no other way he would know about that. So when Detective Combest asked him, "Do you have anything to say?" he shook his head no, and he raised his hand up in a clenched fist salute, which he recognized years later as a clenched fist salute, and then he lost consciousness. And when I read Combest's testimony, I was trying to reconcile whether he was telling the truth or not. And I was sitting at my desk, and I'm looking at pictures, and I'm just looking, and all of a sudden, it just hit me. I looked down and saw the picture of Oswald being dragged on the stretcher into the ambulance in the Dallas police basement, and his right fist is still clenched in that clenched fist salute. Not only that, there's a picture taken and published in my book that shows the ambulance arriving at Parkland Hospital, and Oswald still has that fist in his clenched fist salute. So that's, in my mind, that's photographic evidence that proves that Oswald gave a clenched fist salute as his dying declaration. He did that rather than to say, "Hey, tell my kids, my wife and kids, I love them,"
Right.
Or, Oswald was an atheist, but it could have been your come to Jesus time. It could have been anything. He refused all of that. And he died giving the clenched fist salute. And I don't think you can get any more hardcore than that. I mean, to put your ideology above your wife and your kids, as your life is slipping away from you, and your last intentional physical act on earth is to give a clenched fist salute. That to me is very persuasive.
Yeah, well, the middle finger might have been
That's
might have been a little bit more of a statement.
I'm sure he would have done that too if he could. Absolutely. But it didn't happen. I thought, well, then as a cop, when I'd write something, I would think, okay, how is a defense attorney going to tear this apart? So when I was writing this book, I was thinking, okay, how is a conspiracy theorist going to look at this, or what would they say to it? And I looked at videos of Oswald being shot, and the videos I saw cannot see his hands clenching up in pain like that. When I saw the picture, I don't see that at all. So it wasn't from the shooting. It was his intentional physical act of giving the clenched fist salute like he had given 2 days earlier on the 3rd floor of the Dallas Police Headquarters. He did it again.
Because they had uncuffed him pretty quickly after he
did.
Right.
And he wasn't going anywhere. They all knew that. So
right.
There's no harm in that. Absolutely. And, it's I think that's very, very compelling. It shows what Oswald was all about.
Yeah. Now, I don't know how exactly, the human body would, reacts after you're shot or you're on the verge of death or passing out or whatever it is.
Right.
Of course, it could be an involuntary reaction, or it could have been he was in so much pain and that was just it. Or like you said, it could be interpreted as a big FU. And, now that you mention it, I want to say that I think I've seen some of these older socialist or communist books with that fist symbol on the front of it.
Yeah, you do. And in fact, in my book, I published one. I want to publish more, but as you know, as you publish books, people want to get paid for it, and I couldn't afford to spend several $100s on each picture I want to put in my book, and I just couldn't do it. But I was able to get one, and if you Google this, you'll see the clenched fist salute. I mean, it's just fascinating how that symbol is used for solidarity for a political purpose.
Yeah, for sure.
What you believe in.
All right, well, let's get into what I assumed this entire book was going to be about before I actually read it.
Right.
And I did a show on this in the past about the PSE machine and George O'Toole and his book, The Assassination Tapes, and his interpretation of a pretty rudimentary computer voice stress analysis, that could have been done in the 70s. We probably, we all know what computers were like in the 70s.
Sure.
And I said, I think during that show, that'd be great if somebody could do an updated version with technology from today and compare it and see what happens. And that's exactly what you did in this book. So tell us a little bit about it.
Well, there's a couple of things there. Let's go back to O'Toole. The PSE is a psychological stress evaluator. It was brand new. It was in its infancy. There was no metric by which to compare its scientific robustness or validity to it. The problem I have with O'Toole, a couple things. First of all, he took a 3-day orientation course on a PSE, then started to run these tapes through his machine. He has no further training or experience with that, and that's huge. That's the first red flag. The second one is reading his books. He said that he generated more charts concerning Oswald, that people wrote letters confirming his analysis, yet those don't appear in his books. There's only one Oswald chart. I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir. That's it. The letters he says confirming his analysis are not published. When I contacted Dector, the company who owns them now, said that they don't have any documentation at all. So that's lost to posterity as well. So I have a lot of problems with O'Toole's work. Most of it is all conspiracy related, and that's okay. And that's what he was. He was a conspiracy theorist. In fact, in my book, we can go into this a little bit later, I have a picture of Robert Grodin and George O'Toole, Mark Lane, Donald Freed, George Michael Evica, all those guys together. I call them the Rat Pack of conspiracy theorists because that's what they were doing. That's what they were. So I think that kind of tainted his results. For me, anyways, when I am not an expert in the CVSA, and I recognize that. So I contacted the gentleman that does the computer voice stress analysis for my agency. He works for the man that invented the CVSA in the 80s. His name is Jerry Cry. I gave Jerry one chart. I didn't shoot anybody, no, sir. I said, Jerry, here's what I want to do. I want you to run this through a machine and see what you tell me. I didn't give him what the results should be or what I wanted. I say, let's see if this works. Yeah. And when he brought it back out, when he did his work and showed me, it was absolutely amazing how he was able to discern that. For those like me who are laymen with this, it's very simple. I'll put it this way. The human voice is like an AM and FM frequency. The AM frequency is the audible frequency, as you can hear right now. The FM is the inaudible frequency. When we are being dishonest, that FM frequency disappears. And the disappearance of that FM frequency is what the CVSA measures.
So is the CVSA is it in use to this day? I mean, is it available to
Absolutely.
Really?
Yes, sir. I took one for the sheriff's office, and in fact, in '99, actually, I think it's '98. I took one for the sheriff's office, and I answered all questions honestly, of course. And the lady goes, "Okay, now I want you to lie to me." And she's wearing glasses. I want you to deny that I'm wearing glasses. So I lied on it. And at the end, she goes, "Okay, here it is." I said, "Can I see it?" She's like, "Yeah." So all my questions have a little Christmas tree-like diagram on it. The one where I lied, or she wanted me to lie on, looked more like hedges, looked more like a mountain. Right. And she goes, "Here it is." I'm like, "Wow." That was my first experience with the CVSA.
And now it's I know like lie detector tests aren't admissible. I know PSE is not admissible.
No, they're not.
Is this admissible in court?
No. There have been some civil cases where it's allowed.
Right.
But it's used by more than 2,000 law enforcement agencies. The latest survey said that it's more than 98% effective. There have been earlier surveys where it said that it wasn't very effective. Those are back in the 80s. Now that technology has changed and improved, it has more than a 98% accuracy rate. And the thing here was I gave Jerry 9 audio clips from Dallas and 4 from New Orleans, and I published every single one. And there was one where I'm kind of unsure about, but I published all of them because I wanted people to see that yes, this worked. And a lot of times you'll see he told the truth and he lied in the same breath.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, I always saw this stuff on like the newer, crime shows on TV, and I was wondering, I wonder if they actually use that. But I guess they do. Just as a tool to help them, kind of know whether or not this guy's lying or not.
And it's an investigative tool, and you're right, it's not allowed in courts. They have to meet a very strict threshold for admitting evidence into court. So yes, it's just a tool to use. And I don't know why George O'Toole did what he did. He only used one graph. He didn't produce any other documentation at all. And I don't know why he did that. But in my book, I publish everything because I want people to see that there's nothing to hide, that this is what the charts don't lie. It is what it is. For example, one of my charts was a policeman hit me. Completely truthful. We all know a policeman hit him, more than one. Yeah. And he was telling the truth, and the chart showed he was telling the truth on that one. Then when I did the chart for his New Orleans radio program, he says that he was honorably discharged, achieving the rank of buck sergeant. We all know he wasn't a buck sergeant; he was a private. That, he said, just about melted the CVSA charts because it showed huge levels of stress when he's talking about him being discharged as a buck sergeant.
Yeah, why would he say that in public?
Well, and that's the thing is, why would he do something? I think he was just trying to make himself bigger than what he was, trying to impress his listeners. And, back then it was a lot harder to confirm someone's bona fides as it is now. Well, now, you know how it is. You can get your information with a couple, movement of your fingertips. And back then you really couldn't do it.
Yeah, that's true.
I will say this. There was one chart which I'm kind of stuck on, and it said that he had members in this area for several months now. He was asked by Bill Stuckey about how many members does he have in the Fair Play for Cuba Committee, and he said, we've had members in this area for several months now. It shows that he was not being deceptive with that response.
Right.
So how do you reconcile that? We know he was the only member. So, it's the guy who did the voice stress, Jerry Crotty, said, if you believe it, it's not going to register on it. So if you really believe something, it's not going to show up as deception. So I don't know why that chart ended up that way.
Well, if you count Lee Harvey Oswald and Alec Heidel, there's 2
There you go. Who knows? Maybe he was thinking of the people that helped him distribute the leaflets. Yeah, both his names. I have both their names in my book. Maybe he was thinking that. Maybe there were other members that we don't know about. I highly doubt that. But maybe there are other members that maybe showed interest, or and they've never been identified. I don't know. But either way, it showed no deception indicated. So that was a very interesting chart, and one I have a hard time reconciling. But it is what it is. For whatever reason, it showed that he was not being deceptive.
Well, the reason O'Toole probably didn't put those other charts in his book, they probably didn't come out the way he wanted them to. I'm guessing.
Well, and here's I neglected to mention something very important about O'Toole's charts. Here's the crux of the problem I have with O'Toole. The PSE, the Psychological Stress Evaluator, has two modes, mode 1 and 2. 1 is for the male voice because we have bass in our voice. Mode 2 is for female voices because they are devoid of bass. When I looked at O'Toole's chart of I didn't shoot anybody, no sir, it looked totally different than the CVSA chart that Jerry Crotty did for me for the same exact wording. I didn't know how to reconcile that. And when he showed it to the gentleman, his boss, who created the CVSA, his boss goes, I can tell you exactly what he did. He slowed the chart down. So what O'Toole did was, when he was analyzing that, he did it in mode 2 instead of mode 1. When I had Jerry do that in mode 2, it almost mirrored O'Toole's chart. Now, I asked Jerry, well, the next best thing is let's go ahead and get the PSE. Let's fire one of those babies up and do it. And we couldn't do it. The chart, the machines are so old; they're almost 50 years old. The surplus parts don't exist. The paper doesn't exist anymore. The styluses, don't exist anymore. So we couldn't do it. So the next best thing was to do a CVSA on that. And to confirm that analysis, when I ran the CVSA in mode 2, it almost mirrored exactly what O'Toole did. So I in my mind anyways, I proved that O'Toole used the wrong mode on the PSC. Whether that was intentional or not, I don't know. But he took a course on it, so he should have known better.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, O'Toole's book it wasn't just about Oswald.
Right.
He was running in on cops. He was running on witnesses and everybody else.
He did. That's right.
A follow up if you ever start writing a Malcontent Part 2.
Yeah.
I would love to see some, like some of the other characters, maybe analyze a little bit, like Bill Frazier and his statements.
That's it. Yeah.
Only because I think he's lying, and I'm not saying that to be, like he's a malicious person.
Right.
But I'm thinking he's lying about the size of the package, and I don't know quite why yet. But if you're familiar with rifles at all, you're a hunter. He was a rifle owner and a hunter. I mean, what a rifle in a bag or a case or anything. You know what it is. You know what I'm saying? Right. It has a certain shape, and it's, you can just look at it and be like, okay, there's a rifle in that, and I always thought that if he knew what the reason was that he didn't actually cop to knowing that Oswald brought a rifle to work that day, is if he was afraid of getting lumped in with him, or because he knew that Oswald brought a rifle, he would be in trouble as well. I just never understood that.
Well, it could be several. Well, it could be several things. People lie because they're scared. That's one reason why they lie. Right. So maybe he knew. Maybe he saw the outlander rifle, and maybe he didn't want to ask any questions. And once Kennedy was killed, he's like, "Oh my God, maybe I could have prevented it." Maybe, let's face the fact here. He was a common laborer. All right. So I don't want to hate to say this, but maybe they weren't exactly the brightest bulbs in the bunch. So maybe he didn't pay much attention to it. Maybe he just didn't care, or maybe he saw it and didn't say anything about it. And then once the assassination happened, he realizes the situation he was in, and the self-preservation mode kicked in. I don't know. I want to do the other witnesses, but it was very expensive to get this test done. Yeah. And I couldn't do it. That's something, and that's the other thing. I didn't do the witnesses just for the mere fact that if the Oswald chart in O'Toole's book is wrong, and I prove that it was wrong, that calls into question all the other charts he did. I don't trust a thing he did in this book. And I think I proved in my book that I replicated his erroneous charts and showed that his methodology was wrong. So, people who quote this book have to realize I proved that what he said, what he did is wrong.
Right. All right, let's get into a little bit about Detective Lavelle, because I know, and it's not very often that you could sit down with somebody who was in that position, in that time, in that place, to be part of history like this. So talk a little bit about your time with Detective Lavelle.
I'm friends with a Dallas police officer who knows Lavelle and takes him out to lunch every week. When I called my friend and said, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book on Lee Harvey Oswald, he goes, let me get you in touch with Lavelle because he has notes from that day that no one's ever seen, much less published. I'm like, great. So we flew out there, took my son out there, my 10-year-old son at the time, and we met with Lavelle. And, he was 98 at that time, and he was amazing. He sat there with my son, answered all his questions for an hour. And just, when I walked up, he was eating eggs. I looked through the window. I'm like, oh, he's eating eggs. I can't bother him. Oh, no, go ahead. Everyone does it all the time. And he just had, this amazing way, amazing recall of the events that happened that day. And then I got his binder that showed, had his personal notes. I just couldn't believe it. It was amazing.
Yeah, and all this is reproduced in the book. So
it is. And I will say this, and I'm trying to get permission to publish it for my next book, which is about the radicalization of Lee Harvey Oswald, is I have copies of Officer J.D. Tippett's Hook book, which is the names of all the people he's arrested or come in contact with. And I have a copy of that, and I have a copy of the last 3 names he wrote down in his notebook before he came across Oswald. So and I have pictures of the bullets that were in his gun belt, all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot more information I have out there that hopefully I can publish in my next book. But yeah, that trip was very, very, very fruitful. And as a side note, a lot of people like to malign Jim. All those guys that malign him, I can bet have never met the guy. So it's one thing to read a book or to watch a documentary. Oh, he's lying or he's covering something up. But go out there to Garland, Texas, and go meet with him and talk with him, and you realize this guy is absolutely 100% the real deal.
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of people give him crap because in that one picture, the famous picture where Ruby's shooting Oswald, he's kind of leaning back out of the way, like, hey.
Well, heck yeah. I mean, you got a gunshot right there, and in that one picture, it looks like what's he doing? But if you watch it in real time, it happens in a wink of an eye. And people react to gunshots differently, react to situations differently, as we all know. So there's nothing nefarious about that. It's just him reacting to a gunshot. And I would say this, if someone next to me was shot, I would probably, be acting a little differently.
Yeah, and you're handcuffed to the guy. I mean,
anywhere.
You got his hand in his pants, and you kind of leading him along, and I don't know what people expect. Did they expect him to jump in front and take a bullet for the guy that just killed a cop and the president of the United States? I mean, I know I wouldn't.
Right. Well,
but he reacted quickly enough, to wrestle, down afterwards.
Not to mention, you've got a guy with a gun a foot away from you. So, I mean, it's just, we all come to expect this is what's going on, but at that time, they had no idea. So you're trying to react to an action, and I think they did very well. Was able not to get start over. I think he did very well that Ruby was not able to fire off any more shots, just that one shot. Yeah,
Ruby's lucky he didn't get shot himself. I mean,
there you go.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Oh,
absolutely.
All right, Sean. Well, I think we gave everybody a good overview of it. Is there anything we left out you think we should touch on?
No, I mean, there's more charts and that kind of thing, but they can go on my website or grab the book and look at the charts and that. But, I put examples of real life criminal examples of how the CVSA works. So innocent, like no deception indicated responses, and then deception indicated responses. So there's some sort of metric by which they can compare it to. So they go there and look at these. I have Jerry had no dog in the fight. He was like, the charts are what they are, and this is what it is. I can't tell you why he said this, but this is what here's deception and here's no deception. So I think it's a very, very interesting study, and I'm very surprised no one has done that prior to me.
Yeah, it's been all these years and all this technology, and you would think that it would occur to somebody to do this again, but I'm glad you did it because, it's very eye-opening, I must say.
Well, thank you. I think everyone relied on O'Toole's analysis. Oh, that's been done already. O'Toole wrote the assassination tapes. It's been done, but it was done incorrectly. And if you look at my charts and look at the documentation, you'll see that I proved it was done incorrectly, that his book means absolutely nothing as far as that's concerned. And I think I'm glad that it was done. People may not, we can't trust the CVSA. Well, it is what it is. You can either accept it or not.
Yeah, people are always going to say that. They say it about lie detectors. They said it about the PSE machine. They said it about the CVSA. But it's got a pretty good rate. I mean,
yes,
98%.
98%. According to one of the newest studies, 98% law enforcement agencies use them routinely, not only here but around the world.
Yeah.
And I also have a letter from. There are only 3 computer voice stress master examiners in the entire world. One of them is dead. I was able to have one of them who went overseas and interrogated the Taliban and suspected terrorists and ran them through the CVSA, write a letter in my book, which is published, stating that he's reviewed the analysis from Jerry Crotty and that, yes, he concurs with the analysis. So I've got people putting their necks out on the line saying, hey, this is correct.
And one other thing, forgot about this in your book, previously unpublished, Michael Payne. Tell us a little bit about that real quick.
Well, it's amazing what you'll get with just being nice to somebody. So I was able to find Michael Payne's information. Actually, I called Ruth Payne, and I got her answering machine. So I left a very nice message. Didn't hear from her for a couple weeks. I didn't pester her. I called her again. Left a message, nothing. I'm like, well, okay, I'm not going to bother the lady anymore. She's getting on in years. Her son, Chris Payne, ended up calling me. And, if you're polite and respectful to somebody and not a complete lunatic, you're going to get somewhere. So I told him, here's a book I'm writing. Here's, the way it's going. And I would like this letter or this manuscript I heard that your dad wrote. And he goes, yes, I do have it. And he goes, as a matter of fact, give me your email and I'll email it to you. I said, do I have your permission to publish? He's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. So, he and I went back and forth a couple of times. He gave me the manuscript. And it's very, very – basically, Oswald said the only way you get anywhere is through violence. And, and Michael Payne had 3 or 4 deeply political and philosophical conversations with Lee Harvey Oswald. And it has been unavailable. It has never been published anyways, except for one line out of the 7 pages in the manuscript, single-spaced. So I published that for the first time because here's the other thing, Rob. Anybody can publish anything about the assassination. All they do is regurgitate what's already out there. Right. If I was going to write a book, I want something new. This behavior analysis has been done a little bit before, but not as much as I've done it. The computer voice stress analysis has never been done. And I want to add more documents to show, the mindset, if you can, of Lee Harvey Oswald. So I thought it was very interesting to get his manuscript and to look at for someone who actually spoke to and had conversations with Lee Harvey Oswald.
Yeah, for sure. And you did exactly that. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed reading this book because it's not like any other book out there, really. I mean, it doesn't push down your throat, Lee Harvey Oswald is guilty. I mean, it gave you reasons why and examples why, and it ties everything together beautifully. And I think you did a great job, Sean.
Well, thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. The thing is, the lone nut conspiracy, the lone nut people and the conspiracy people are at each other's throats. It gets very personal. It gets very nasty sometimes. And I even thank Robert Groden and J. Gary Shaw, who I totally disagree with, but I thank them for cooperating with me because there's no need to make it personal. This is what there could have been a conspiracy. Oswald, maybe in Mexico City, might have been, influenced by some rogue Cubans. I have no idea. There's no proof of that. But, I don't totally discount that someone didn't influence him. It could have been a conspiracy. I just find no evidence of it. What I see all points to Lee Harvey Oswald. We'll never know every single thing about what happened. You can't know every single thing about any event. So I don't want to close that door on it. But this is what I see as a cop, and this is the evidence I've put out there. And if someone has something different to offer, and so be it. But this is from my perspective what I think happened.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, you get the crazies on both sides, the lone nut conspiracy theories, and personally, I just want the truth and things that can be proven, one way or the other. And I think you did a good job proving, your theory. And it's hard to refute, man. I tell you what, it's hard to refute.
Well, thank you.
Without sounding like a crazy conspiracy theorist.
What I used were primary sources, because if I use secondary sources, they're getting their sources from somebody else, and then you just lose the value of that. So primary sources as a history major is where I went to. And, the one final thing I have to say is the conspiracy that most conspiracy theorists talk about that occurred with Kennedy, that's unrealistic. That's being divorced from reality, because that type of conspiracy has never existed before or since the Kennedy assassination. You can't get all the cops, all the newsmen, the doctors, everybody to lie. You can't, and to fake all this evidence. I can't get the government to deliver my mail.
Right.
How are they going to do all this stuff in a short amount of time? It's just unrealistic. It's being divorced from reality. And I think people really have to come back to reality and say, is this feasible? Is this reasonable? And for the most part, no, it's not. In my opinion, anyways.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, there's way too many moving parts if you start thinking that everything is, part of the conspiracy.
You can't do it. It's impossible. Sometimes I think, you just have to step out and look at it from a different perspective. Okay, is this reasonable? And then kind of work your way that way.
All right, Sean, give everybody your website once more and where they can get the book again before we get out of here.
It's SeanDeGrilla.com, and it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and on my website as well.
Right, and the last name is spelled Degrilla, for
That's
folks
correct.
who can't spell very well.
Yeah, it's not a common spelling, no doubt about it. But I enjoyed writing Malcontent, and I'm glad you liked it, and I hope others like it as well. And thank you so much for having me on your show. It's been an honor. I really do appreciate it.
No problem. And when you get that next book written, give me a shout, and you can come back on and we can talk about that.
I look forward to it. Thank you. Absolutely.
All right, Sean, you hang on for me. I'm going to close this out here. All right, everybody. Thank you for listening. Thank you to my guest, Sean DeGrilla, for coming on the show. Make sure you check out his book, Malcontent. It might change your mind, folks. Anyway, that's it for us today. Catch you next time. Peace.